So my name is Vincent, and I used to be a paranormal investigator. I don't mean like the fake ones from TV shows and movies. I worked as an investigator for about 15 years. In that time, I encountered all kinds of strange beings. Most of the time, it was just some ghost who felt the need to fuck around with some innocent person. Those were pretty easy to deal with. Then there were the darker spirits, ones that had a far more malevolent agenda at play. I have almost been burned alive, eaten, possessed, drowned in pig's blood, and a whole host of terrifying situations that are too numerous to discuss. But there was one case that I worked on which was far worse than all the rest. It was the case that made me quit. The case started, as most of them do, with a phone call to our agency. It was from a coal mining company out in the Appalachian Mountains. The caller was one of the managers of the mining operation, and he was explaining how many of the workers had noticed some strange things going on in and around the mine. He also said that they had unearthed some objects buried deep underground that he felt would be better to show us in person than to explain over the phone. I was assigned the case, as were two other investigators named Tommy and Linda. We flew out to the mine and began our investigation. The mine was located just outside of a small town deep in the mountains. The entrance to the mine was dug into the side of the mountain, and one could see its slow, decent deep beneath the surface. There were a few portable buildings and heavy machinery spread out around the mine. Miners hung out around the areas, some doing work, others heading into the mine, and others drinking some beers. The head manager of the mine met us out front. He wore a gray jacket with the company logo on it, as well as some work boots and a hard hat with a light attached to it. He was also a rather fat man. He first brought us over to the edge of the forest to show us the first strange occurrence. He pointed at the trees. All of the trees were dripping blood. I don't mean that the trees were covered in blood, but there sure as hell was a lot of it. There must have been about 50 trees. Each one of them was pouring blood onto the ground below. There were puddles of it everywhere. Linda pulled out a few containers, and we all started to take some samples of the blood from several different trees. We then went back to the mine and ran some tests on the blood. Turns out each tree was dripping a different type of blood, which meant it came from several different sources. The DNA tests confirmed it was from multiple different people. We went through the DNA database, but found no matches. The manager then decided he ought to show us what they found in the mine. We walked through the mine's entrance. We were each given a hard hat with a light attached to it, so we could see accurately. We walked down to the end of the tunnel, where it sectioned off into multiple other tunnels. The manager led us down one, which led to a very rickety elevator. We hopped in, and we slowly made our descent. It took us about 20 minutes, going slow as hell, to finally reach our stop. We were told that we were about 500 feet beneath the surface on the lowest level of the mine. The air was cold down on this level. They had no miners on this level of the mine. There were only a few dim lights illuminating the tunnels. The walls and ground were incredibly rugged and rocky. The manager led us down a confusing maze of caverns and tunnels. We would occasionally descend down some ladders. He gave each of us a map of the mine in case we got separated. We finally reached the spot he was leading us to. It was a hole carved into the rock wall by one of the miners. The hole led to a cavern on the other side. We stepped through the hole in the wall and turned on our headlamps. The cavern was shaped like a massive cylinder that went quite high up. The ground was somewhat wet. Upon closer investigation, we were shocked to find that we were not standing in water. We were standing in blood. A very thin layer of it covered the cavern floor. We immediately took some samples of it. Then we saw what the miners had actually found. It was some kind of a shrine. It was one of the most disturbing things that I have ever seen. It was arranged with a large table in the middle. Each of the legs of the table had a marble snake wrapped around it. Resting on the table, we found about 10 skeletal remains of newborn children. Except the children clearly had numerous birth defects. One's head was too big for its body. Another had 2 normal arms, and one tiny one stretched out of its chest. Another had growths protruding from several different locations on its skeleton. Behind the table there's, say, another skeleton. It was pure black, almost like it had been burned. It was about 10 feet tall, and was holding its skull in its hands, looking down at the children. Its skull looked like a human skull, albeit jet black and much bigger, except it had 4 horns protruding out of it. We approached the shrine and took several photographs of it from several different angles. I just couldn't understand it. First off, the cavern had been completely sealed shut when we had entered. The first ever entrance ever made into the cavern came from the miners. I then realized something. We took several DNA samples from the skeletons. We then returned to the surface. When we returned to the surface, we compared them with the DNA we had found in the blood on the trees. They matched perfectly. The blood had come from the children. I felt like I was going to be sick. This case was certainly one of the worst I had ever encountered. I informed the manager that he had to shut down the mine until we could figure out what the hell was going on. He refused, saying that stopping production now would cost the company a shitload, plus these workers need the money to feed their families. I told him that he was putting his workers in danger, but he refused to listen. Later on, we went back into the mine and continued the investigation. I followed the walls of the cavern and felt for any irregularities. Tommy held an energy scanner in his hand. It would start beeping whenever it encountered a strong energy source. When he hovered it over the shrine, it started beeping quite a fair bit. I went over to one of the walls and I noticed something. It appeared to be a lot smoother than the rest of the cavern. Then I knocked on it. It was hollow. I brought Tommy and Linda over to it. Tommy's energy scanner went haywire when he hovered it over the wall. More so than for the shrine. Just beep, 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 over and over again. I called the manager over and told him to get some miners to bust this wall down. They arrived a little while later with drills and explosives. They immediately started drilling, and it didn't take long for the wall to collapse. We were left with a giant hole in the cave wall. It was a very dark tunnel, extending very far, and was descending at a steep incline. Me, Tommy, and Linda descended into the tunnel. We walked for quite a ways down this tunnel. It just went on and on. The light from our helmets only extended a few feet in front of us. We eventually reached the end of the tunnel. It opened up into a vast cavern filled with stalactites and stalagmites. I could hear running water in the distance. Tommy's scanner was going nuts by this point. We maneuvered our way through the cavern. It varied quite considerably in terms of terrain. I pushed myself past a particularly large stalagmite. And when I looked back, I noticed something. Linda was gone. Like she just fucking vanished. Me and Tommy looked around wildly in all directions. We called out her name several times. She didn't answer. We were about to retrace our steps when all of a sudden we heard something out a ways in front of us. It was crying. Uncontrollable sobbing. We pointed our helmets out to it, but it was too far into the cavern. We followed the source of the noise, and as we did, Tommy's scanner went completely nuts. We eventually found the source of the noise. It was 10 little children, each one with numerous different birth defects. They were all crying hysterically. They were chained against the wall of the cavern with giant padlocks. I immediately ran to them and tried to break the chains. They didn't even seem to notice I was there. Then, something changed. A strange feeling of dread washed over me. I realized Tommy's scanner had stopped beeping. I looked back and he was gone. I looked all around me. Then, I felt him before I saw him. A feeling I had never felt before and is very difficult to describe. It was like sadness. It towered over me. It was completely naked and lacked genitals. Its body was covered in scars and bumps and burns. Its face was the most scarred of all and had 4 giant horns sticking out of it. 2 on its head and 2 beneath its mouth. And then I saw its eyes. And then I saw. And then I saw. I saw the misery of the human race. I saw people being murdered, tortured, starved, and abused. I saw millions enslaved by cruel masters. I saw millions march to their deaths at the hands of evil. I saw wars. Wars fought on blackened earth, with the bodies of young men strewn about. I saw people dying of disease and sickness, spending their last moments in painful agony. And then I saw these children, sold to this cruel being because their parents did not want them. They abandoned them, and he found them, and now they were his. I woke up several days later in the middle of the forest. I had been sent several miles away from the mine. I later found Tommy and Linda. They both told me they were sent off in a similar way that I had, although they didn't experience what I experienced. The manager of the mine told me the cavern collapsed, and after extensive digging they were unable to find any evidence of the shrine or anything we had witnessed. They continued mining operations and did not encounter any other strange phenomenon. As for me, I tried to go back to my job. I really did. I ran a few more cases, but I would have panic attacks on the job and random flashbacks to what he showed me. Eventually, I decided it would be in everyone's best interest if I just quit. I currently work as taxi driver. I know, quite the career change. But it pays well enough, and I enjoy it well enough. But when I close my eyes at night, or when I'm daydreaming out of boredom, I see those images. I see those children. I see him.